CH13, have you got a theory of change? So, Mike, let's begin with the obvious question. What is a theory of change?
Well, Nudrat, let me answer that with an example. Just imagine that you're working with people who are addicted to drugs. Now, your theory of change might be, how are we going to work with them in such a way that they move from being dependent on drugs to a situation where they're getting free of drugs? And so you might begin to map that out. You might say, well, the first thing we have to do is to make contact with people who are bound up with drugs. And then the second thing we'll do is we'll invite them to a social group where they can get to know other people and feel supported and loved and make a contribution to it. And then the third thing we'll do is, as those people who are addicted feel at home in the group, we'll invite them to meet a key worker on a regular basis who can help them to become free of their drug dependency. And so your theory of change is that we first of all make contact with people. Secondly, we invite them to a social group. And then thirdly, we connect them with a key worker. And that's a theory of change. How do you encourage people to move from one stage to another stage, but you're doing all that with their permission, with their enthusiastic support, and so on. Now, our theory of change, when you start new Christian communities, is what we call the missional journey. You start with listening. You listen to God in the context. You find a simple way, you and your team listen together to God in the context. You find a practical way to love people regularly. You then, as people gather around that activity of love, you build community with them. Then in the context of community, you share Jesus, you share the gospel. And then as people begin to be found by Jesus and discover Jesus, you encourage them to form a worshiping community where they are connected to the wider church. And then hopefully you encourage them to repeat the process in their own way to do what you've done. So the journey is listen, love, community, share Jesus, church begins to emerge, or something with a flavor of church emerges, do it again, repeat the process.
I'm just wondering, is that a jump from community to sharing Jesus?
Well, yeah, I mean, in real life, of course, these different circle stages, they all overlap. It's much more messy than I've described. Sometimes the stages all pile on top of each other. So you may be sharing Jesus much earlier on, but your focus may move from focusing on community to focusing on sharing Jesus. And yeah, there is a jump there. And so people say, well, how on earth do we do this? Whoa, how do we make this jump? And one thing you can do is to set up a separate group for people who want to explore spirituality. So I'm thinking of Tim. He and a group of young adults, they invited families to go canoeing with them on Saturday afternoons. They offered free canoeing, and after they canoed together, they'd have a barbecue or a picnic together. And as part of the social time, one of the young adults, because they were families, would tell a Bible story for the children. And of course, the adults would listen in. After a while, Tim said, if you're interested in exploring some of this more, I meet in my home on Tuesdays at 6:00, and there'll be 2 or 3 of us there. Why don't you come for food and Bible story? And so a group of them gathered on Tuesday evenings. They would chat together, they'd have fun together, they'd hang out together, but they would also look at some of the stories that Jesus told. Tim might have said, well, Jesus is one of the world's greatest spiritual teachers. We look at some of the stories he told, see if we agree with them. So that's what they did. They looked at some of the gospel passages and they began to discuss them together. So one thing you can do is to set up a separate group for people who want to explore Jesus. The loving activity, the canoeing continues, everyone comes to that, but there's this separate group, if you like, for those who want to explore spirituality. And you can do that in lots of different ways. You call it a spirituality group. You can put it in as a very simple addition. If you've got a cafe or a luncheon club or a bereavement group, you can put that alongside the cafe just after it's met for 10, 15, 20 minutes to begin with. Lots of different ways for doing that, but you have this little separate group.
Is that the only way, or could you expand and give us some other ideas if there are any?
Oh yeah. I mean, just read this chapter in the GodSend book, because you'll find several ideas. But another idea that's been really fruitful is to invite people who are asking questions about faith, if you like, or asking questions about spirituality. You might say to them, we meet as a team every other week on a Wednesday evening. We eat together, we have fun together, we do a little bit of praying together. And we also look at some of the stories that Jesus told. Jesus is a great spiritual teacher. We look at these stories that he told, see if we agree with them. Why don't you come and visit us? And then if you like what we're doing, you're welcome to come back, but you can take part in the discussion, eat with us, join in with the planning, because we do some of our planning then as well. Come and see what you think. And so, I'm thinking of a hot chocolate, which I mentioned, I think, in one of our earlier conversations, which started with a group of Christians. They took mugs of hot chocolate to teenagers who were hanging out in the city centre of Dundee. They found that they wanted a place to rehearse their band, and so they allowed them to use the church building. They built community with them. They got to know them. And when some of the young people said, well, why are you doing this? Or, it was obvious that they would really love to explore spirituality. They invited them to their team planning meetings, and they sort of flexed their worship, their Bible discussion, their praying all around these teenagers who'd visit them. And gradually that became the worshipping heart of the community. And that's been going now for 12, or before lockdown was when I was in touch with them, it had been going for 12 or 13 years. That little community with a focus on young people. So that's another way you can do it. Invite people to your planning meeting, let them join in with the spiritual life of the group.
I'm fascinated with the fact, which you've described, that actually these young people were invited into the planning meeting. That takes courage. That takes courage for people who are leading the group in a way, because all of us, our human nature is we cling on to things. We're leading, so we're going to protect that. And it's that a lot of the times that's the problem, isn't it? We don't let go.
Yeah, Nudrat, but leaders of these communities, they can't have their cake and eat it. They can't, on the one hand, which is what they often say, I wish people would volunteer, I wish we could help us, this is all becoming a bit of a burden. And then on the other hand, not invite people from the community into their planning group. If you want to share the burden of leading one of these communities, if you want to people to help, and so it becomes easier for you to do, you become more resilient. If you're away, the community can go on meeting together because there's a cadre of folks who know what to do and know how to lead it and so on. If you want that, then you have to invite them into your planning group and share your leadership. So, if you're not willing to share your leadership, then don't complain if it all becomes rather hard work. Of course, it's going to become hard work because you're not allowing anyone to help you. For goodness sake, allow people to help you and invite them into your planning meeting. Share this with them. Share your praying with them. Share your discussion with the Bible study with them. Let the Holy Spirit do the work in their lives as you share all this. Take part, let them take part in the discussion. Certainly contribute to the planning. If you're eating together, do it on a bring and share basis. Let them bring some of the food. Just build community with them at the heart of what you're doing. This really is the way to just enhance all that you're doing.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. So we've been talking about how the missional journey is the theory of change, and how the different stages can be a bit messy at times. And sharing Jesus is one of the stages in this missional journey. And sometimes it can seem a little bit of a jump, but it can be a bit overlapping. Exploring, setting up a separate group for those people who want to pursue a little bit more the Bible and the Bible stories and need to explore them more. Sharing the leadership of the group. So you go from discussion to conversation to sharing the leadership. I hope you found this useful. Thank you, Mike. We'll see you next time.